see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. The Labour Party has shown its true colours in its decision to make £500 million worth of cuts to the defence budget in what's hardly a surprise from a group of people who wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. Tonight, I'm calling for the UK to withdraw from the treaty and this foreign court. Elon Musk has been summoned by the Science Committee to answer questions in Parliament about online misinformation. I'll be explaining why I think he should attend. Plus, the former Deputy Prime Minister to Tony Blair, John Prescott, has died at the age of 86, following a battle with Alzheimer's. I'll be reflecting on his career with an old friend of the programme and indeed of John Prescott himself, Sean Woodward, who served in the same government. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and the former Conservative MP, Michael Brown. As always, it's a crucial part of the programme. I want to hear your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. These are your headlines at 8 o'clock. Russian President Vladimir Putin has threatened to strike the UK with a new ballistic missile after using the weapon to hit a target in Ukraine. Downing Street condemned Mr. Putin for further escalating the conflict by using a ballistic missile with a range of several thousand kilometres against the city of Dnipro. Mr. Putin confirmed Russia has tested a new intermediate-range weapon, saying it came in response to Ukrainian strikes on the Russian territory with US and British missiles earlier this week. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the leader of Hamas, as well as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. They say these warrants are as a result of alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. In response, an Israeli foreign minister has said the ICC has, quote, lost all legitimacy with their ruling on Netanyahu and Gallant. Meanwhile, a Hamas senior official has told the Reuters news agency that these warrants are an important step towards justice. Now, back in the UK, the King has paid a warm personal tribute to Lord John Prescott, saying he remembered the great fondness, his unique and indomitable character and infectious sense of humour. King Charles hailed the former Deputy Prime Minister, who has died at the age of 86, for his decades of public service in frontline politics. His family said he'd spent his life trying to improve the lives of others, fighting for social justice and protecting the environment. In other news, journalist Alison Pearson has told GBNews she is hugely relieved that Essex Police has dropped its investigation into her tweet. Ms Pearson was being investigated for allegedly stirring up racial hatred with a social media post made in November last year. But the force now says no charges will be brought, having sought advice from the Crown Prosecution Service. Ms Pearson says her case has revealed the appalling overuse of non-crime hate incidents to silence opinions. To the US now, where Donald Trump ally Matt Gaetz has withdrawn his name from consideration to be the next US Attorney General after days of debate over whether to release a report on alleged sexual misconduct and drug use. Posting on X, the 42-year-old said that the controversy over his potential nomination was unfairly becoming a distraction to the work of the incoming Trump administration. And the daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore and her husband have been accused of repeated misconduct following a report carried out by the Charity Commission. The investigation found a misleading implication that donations from book sales would be made to the Captain Tom Foundation, an amount totalling almost £1.5 million. Commenting on the report, the family has described it as unjust and excessive, adding that they, quote, never took a penny from the public donations raised by Captain Tom. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. The number one priority of any government is defence of the realm, and it was only a matter of time before Labour betrayed that obligation. After repeatedly implying that it would maintain defence spending during the election campaign, it has been announced that Labour will cut defence spending by £500 million after giving over £1 billion to junior doctors. The cuts have targeted the Watchkeeper drone programme, as well as the Navy's landing platform docks, HMS Albion and HMS Bulwark, and the Type 23 frigate HMS Northumberland. But none of this should be a surprise. Of those in the Labour government, many were in the NATO-opposing pacifist Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. To name a few, the Leader of the House, Lucy Powell, Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, Defence Secretary John Healey, and, of course, the Prime Minister himself, the Reverend Sir Keir Starmer. All of these people wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be the Prime Minister. Now, Jeremy Corbyn wanted NATO to be disbanded, claiming it could create great danger in the world. He wanted decommissioned Trident, infamously voting against its renewal in 2016. Jeremy Corbyn is a man so committed to pacifism, which is a perfectly honourable cause, that he occasionally found himself referring to enemies of the West as his friends, and the people now running the country wanted him to be Prime Minister. This decision has come in the midst of the West facing 2 proxy wars and at risk of a third. What must Putin or the Iranian mullahs be thinking as they see the UK cut back on defence? How tasty a morsel may Taiwan appear to President Xi, seeing this weakness of one of the main defenders of the West and its values? The world is becoming more dangerous, so the West needs to be signalling strength, not weakness. Never forget, it was only a matter of months after the deadly and poorly managed withdrawal from Afghanistan that Putin began surrounding the borders of eastern Ukraine with 100,000 Russian troops. History shows that the West prevails against dictators only when it shows strength. But Labour's decision to cut defence spending is a sign of weakness, and there will be consequences from it. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined now by the former Armed Forces Minister under Gordon Brown, Bill Rammell. Bill, thank you for coming in. And you had a reputation as a really serious defence minister. You must be saddened to see defence expenditure being cut. Regardless of why it may be being done and the arguments that may be made about Tory mismanagement, all of that, but just in principle, in these times of all times, to see defence expenditure cut is not what we want.
But, Jacob, I think that's a mischaracterisation. And firstly, the knockabout stuff about, this is like Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think anyone's in any doubt that Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer's government are a million light years away from Corbyn's agenda that Keir opposed and I opposed.
Hold on. As you've raised that, Keir Starmer was one of the most important members of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. He called him his friend at that time. He wanted him to be elected. And actually, Jeremy Corbyn got more votes numerically than Keir Starmer managed to get.
Sure, and Keir actually resigned from his shadow cabinet in protest at his leadership. Yes, he came back. But look, collective responsibility exists in all parties.
I do, but other people refused to serve Jeremy Corbyn.
Sure, and I think Keir's view was Jeremy was not going to be elected and it was better to be on the inside trying to influence rather than the outside.
But he did say to the voters he wanted Jeremy Corbyn to win and to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, and he knew that wasn't going to happen. Look, let's come to the substance. Let's come to the substance of this. I don't agree with your analysis on, and they're not cuts, it's about recirculation of money. Decommissioning was ducked by the last Conservative government repeatedly in the run-up to the general election because the Tories feared the political consequences of that. This is 500 million on 6 projects that are going to be decommissioned. Things like ships that haven't sailed for years, helicopters in some cases that are over 50 years old, and in the classic case of HMS Northumberland, a ship that is so riddled with structural damage it's too costly to be repaired. Every penny of that 500 million is going to be reinvested within the military.
But they have given an extra £1 billion, and we've seen today's news on the deficit going up, which has come from increased pay rises to the public sector, at a time when they are spending like mad on their friends in the public sector. Shouldn't they be devoting more resources to defence?
Well,
Isn't that the key?
Go back a couple of weeks to the budget, and £3 billion was given additionally to the MOD.
But then you take one hand, you take away with the other. That we need ships. We're short of ships. This is a long-standing problem. We've been running down our defence for too long. We've paid the peace dividend again and again. We've spent it several times over.
Well, look at the track record. And with respect, Jacob, your government cut defence spending. The last Labour government was spending at 2.5% of GDP.
Yeah.
It was cut. We're committed to increasing it over time. But after the strategic defence review, when we'll have a timetable for that. But if this was a genuine 500 million cut, I would agree with you. It's not. Every penny is going back into the military. And, critically, and I speak as a former Minister of Defence, the service chiefs are backing this. Now, my experience tells me that if the service chiefs weren't really on side, you would hear about that. You're not hearing about it because it's the right decision.
I'm not sure service chiefs should be briefing against government, that their job is to serve the government of the day.
Come on, it's happened under successive
But it's
governments.
completely improper when it does happen.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That it's like judges sounding off, that service chiefs and judges should keep out of politics in both directions, and particularly with a new government, it would be improper of them to be doing that. But it's just keeping the resources that we've got, that you may say we're going to put it into new things, but where are these new things? We need things now. The threat from Russia is considerable. The threat in the Middle East is considerable, and who knows what the Chinese may be thinking about. And it's this failure to project strength, which is so important, it seems to me.
Well, I mean, part of it, so the reinvestment, part of that is going to be for up-to-date, effective drones, which at the moment are critical in the battle.
We're getting rid of quite a lot of drones. Part of this is getting rid of drones.
In order to reinvest. But I tell you this, Jacob, as well, I am committed to proper defence.
Yeah, I know you are. That's why...
But you don't deliver that by giving blank cheques to the MOD.
No, yes.
I've served in three departments of state. I've interacted with all the others. There is no worse waster of public money than the Ministry of Defence.
I don't disagree with that at all, that I had interactions over procurement when, in the Cabinet Office, I was looking at other government procurement, and the MOD's procurement was constantly facing
40 billion waste.
And you absolutely need to have tight control of procurement. I couldn't agree more. I think ensuring that procurement is well spent is halfway to increasing our defence budget.
It is, but it's actually been a failure under successive governments of both parties.
It goes, even when Margaret Thatcher was in charge, there was it the Levine Review?
That's right, yeah.
And that was intended to improve procurement in the 1980s. This is not a new problem for governments. And it seems to be an intrinsic question as to how you get more bang for your buck, I suppose literally in the case of the military, through better procurement.
Well, I hope that's one of the things that's going to come out of the Strategic Defence Review. And that's why I make the point, you can't give blank cheques. And I think you need that Strategic Defence Review to properly assess the threats and what capabilities that we need. But I hope one of the recommendations coming out of that review is a really serious and rigorous approach to procurement, because you're absolutely right. Part of the way you get more money into the military is properly spending it, and it hasn't happened historically.
And I think there's been a problem with successive governments of having ministers as Minister of Defence Procurement there for too short a time, so that you don't get the continuity of political pressure. And you have some excellent ministers for defence procurement of both parties, but then they're reshuffled. The good ones get promoted and the bad ones don't. And that this has led to poor procurement, as you rightly say, for decades.
And I actually think that's been a failure of successive governments. I'll actually give it cross-party his credit. David Cameron was very good at keeping ministers in post for a longer period of time. And anyone knows that you go in, the first 6 months, you're learning on the job. Then, you get a year of delivery, and then you're moved on. That's not a sensible way to run anything, and certainly not
particularly not tens of billions of long-term equipment procurement. Well, we've come to a very happy point of agreement. Bill, thank you very much indeed. After the messages from our sponsors, I'm calling for the UK to leave another foreign court, and this time it isn't the European Court of Human Rights.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Ed Barker, a talented saxophonist and clarinetist from London, has had a remarkable journey in the music industry marked by significant achievements and an unusual crossover into the political sphere. Having honed his musical skills from a young age, he played in both the National Youth Orchestra and the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. In 2012, he became the solo saxophonist for pop legend George Michael. His reputation in music opened doors in politics, where he's worked with various leading Conservative members of Parliament and played a role in a number of major campaigns. To tell us more about the harmonious relationship between music and politics, I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Barker. This is quite puzzling, actually. How did a reputation in music get you into politics?
It's a good question. It's probably a question I'm still wrestling with at the age of 40. How's it happened? But somehow I've managed to do both, and I still enjoy doing them both at a high level. I think it's a simple thing of when you're in politics, you're known as the saxophone guy, and when you're in the saxophone music industry world, you're known as the weird conservative political guy. And so it's just something people can remember you by, regardless of how good you are at either of those two things. I think it's just a device that people can kind of just latch onto to remember you.
But it's the word weird, because I imagine that most people in the music industry are probably somewhat to the left. Certainly all the ones that I've met are. I mean, I can't imagine you and George Michael discussing Tory politics with approval, or maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, I don't tend to talk politics with people kind of when I'm not in politics somehow. And whenever there are political disagreements, people kind of, I think GB News actually gets closest to kind of embodying this spirit. People are very kind of up for learning from each other's kind of experiences and views and not biting each other's heads off.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about Labour's defence cuts, and the mail mogs have come in. Bob says, defence in this country has been underfunded for years. I can't help thinking of 1939. The world is a very dangerous place, and we need strong defence. I have a vested interest as I'm ex-Royal Air Force. Kate says, since I was in the military in the 80s, it's been decimated by every government. If there were a Falkland War again today, we would not fare well. And Maggie says, America's defence budget is probably the largest in the world, and ours is shrinking beyond practical use. If we in America send military aid to Ukraine, what do we think Russia will retaliate against? Now, today, one of the most stupid things has happened. The International Criminal Court has shamefully issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant and Hamas commander, well, that's quite sensible, Mohammed Deif. Now, this is crazy. The British government's going along with it to arrest, if he comes to this country, somebody who is a staunch ally in one of the proxy wars being fought by the West against states that have our disinterest deep and close to their heart. So what I'm proposing is that we should withdraw from the International Criminal Court, from the Rome Statute under which it operates, because it is undermining the security of our nation if we alienate our allies. Well, I'm joined now by the defence editor of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin, as well as my panel, my most intellectual panel, GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and the former Conservative MP, Michael Brown. Con, why do we belong to crazy courts that seem to undermine the West?
Well, I don't know, actually, is a good answer. But we have a Prime Minister who's a human rights lawyer, so he'll be very comfortable with this arrangement. And you'll remember that one of the first things the government did when they took office in the summer was to support the ICC's attempts to prosecute the Israeli Prime Minister. And now it's come to pass, and they are going to find themselves in an almighty mess over this.
Well, and the crony of Keir Starmer, who got made Attorney General, believes that international law is the be-all and the end-all. He puts it on an absolute pedestal. And this means that if a friendly nation sent its Prime Minister to visit the UK, we would be under an obligation to arrest him, which is madness.
It is. And the thing is, I mean, there is a war going on in the Middle East at the moment. Israel is supposed to be our ally. We are certainly not friends of Hamas, which we designate as a terrorist organisation, or Hezbollah, which has the same designation. So, as I said, we're getting ourselves in a terrible mess. And I don't really understand what the purpose of this is at this moment.
Well, it seems to me that this is a proxy war. This is the West against Iran. Iran is funding it, and it is attacking what it thinks is a weak point of the West.
Correct.
And that we are sort of hiding behind the skirts of a maiden aunt in terror and going along with ridiculous nostrums that make the West less safe when we're in a war.
We are in a war, and I mean, the other thing we've got to bear in mind is there's a new kid in the block in Washington, and even the Biden administration has said this is nonsense. And of course, the United States had the good sense not to join the ICC. But I think there's a lot of trouble ahead for Starmer on this, because he's trying. I mean, the statements from Downing Street today is, there will be a domestic process to review this decision, but with Trump coming in, pro-Israel anti-ICC, we are going to find ourselves in a very difficult position.
Nigel, should these essentially politico-diplomatic decisions be made by a strange court rather than a matter of realpolitik that we need to get on with our friends and our allies, and when they're fighting a war, we have to make the judgment, not some obscure court?
It depends if you believe that we should adhere to international law. We signed up perfectly willingly to the ICC.
Tell me what is international law and who legislates?
Well, in this case, the ICC.
But they're not. What basis do they have for legislating?
Because we signed up to the Rome Statute.
Who votes for them to legislate?
No one was ever asked to vote for them.
So what is this concept of international?
Sorry, did you say, Jacob, there isn't such a thing as international law?
Concepts of international law get bandied about, but law, as I understand it, can be changed. You have statutes, you have votes. Where does this international law get changed? Who decides?
We decided to join in 1998. A number of other countries didn't. China, the US didn't. Israel didn't, which is why this will probably never come to anything. But we signed up because we believed in what the International Criminal Court was trying to do. We've been perfectly happy when they put an arrest warrant out for Putin, but when they are even-handed and say, right, we want to arrest...
It's an outrageous thing for you to say, even-handed.
Even-handed.
Putin, a mass murderer, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who are accused his country, where thousands of people are attacked,
who are accused of different crimes. So one of the
to compare Benjamin Netanyahu with
not a question
Putin
of comparing.
You just did.
People can end up in court, in the same court, accused of different things. When
you said they're being even-handed. No, that's
I understand they're being even-handed because it's both Hamas and Israel that they put arrest warrants out for. The charges would be different.
Good and evil.
Starvation as a weapon of war would be an accusation against Israel. Torture, rape and sexual violence would be an allegation against Hamas.
Michael, I'd better let you get a word in edgeways.
I have a very simple view that these international organisations, right the way from the United Nations downwards, European Court of Human Rights, the ICC, United Nations, I'm of the view, very simply held, the view that Margaret Thatcher held. The Foreign Office should look after our foreign affairs and not the foreign affairs of other nations, that our national self-interest trumps everything else, and our national self-interest is to be fully aligned in the conflict in the Middle East with Israel, the only democratic country in that part of the world that has elections, proper elections in the sense of the word that we understand it. Everywhere else is dictatorships where there are no elections, and it's a very simple view of mine that international law is not what should set our foreign policy. Our foreign policy should be set according to Britain's national interest. Full stop, end of.
Well, I think Michael's absolutely right. It is, in fact, a battle between good and evil, and the UK should be on the side of good. Thank you, Con, and to my most intellectual panel. Elon Musk has been summoned by Parliament's the House of Commons Science Committee to defend his platform's supposed role in the riots. After the break, I think he would have a lot of fun if he went.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. The snow and ice risk continues this evening and overnight, and it is going to remain cold before we introduce unsettled weather over the weekend as Storm Bert moves its way in from the west. For the time being, though, we remain in this cold northerly Arctic flow, bringing us that snow and ice risk, so still plenty of snow showers feeding their way in, mainly across northern coast of Scotland, a few feeding into northern coast of Northern Ireland, northwest England and northern parts of Wales, though some may feed inland at times. Where we see the clear skies overnight, that's where we're expecting quite a sharp frost and some patches of ice too. So do take care if you're out and about during early Friday morning. So the showers are set to continue around coastal areas of Scotland, though some may feed inland at times with a brisk northerly flow pushing them inland. Mainly falling as snow over high ground, though likely to see some flurries to lower levels too. A few showers feeding into northern coast of Northern Ireland, northwest England and northern parts of Wales too, so still a snow risk here. But otherwise there'll be plenty of bright sunshine to start on Friday, but still feeling particularly chilly and with those icy stretches too. So otherwise, forecast for Friday. It's going to be a mix once again of those wintry showers and some bright sunshine. Showers mainly feeding into northwestern coasts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and northern parts of Wales. These heavy at times and turning to sleet and snow, mainly above high ground, but once again could fall to lower levels too. Elsewhere, plenty of autumnal sunshine, but once again it is going to be feeling chilly for this time in November. As we head into Saturday, unsettled weather as Storm Bert moves its way in from the west. Heavy outbreaks of rain, this falling to snow at times in the north, and strong winds across parts of Scotland too. And we do have an amber snow and ice warning issued for parts of Scotland, so do stay up to date to our forecasts. So an unsettled weekend ahead. Otherwise, that is it from me. Bye-bye for now.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about the International Criminal Court and why we should leave, and Adam says our own judges are sensible enough to make decisions about British matters without people from foreign courts interfering on things that don't concern them and they are unfamiliar with. And Carter has preempted the next section because he says, I've never voted Labour, but as a Merchant Navy veteran, I'm very grateful to Lord Prescott for being instrumental in the recognition of the Merchant Navy and the establishment of Merchant Navy Day on the 3rd of September every year to remember what this country owes to its merchant seafarers. Elon Musk has been summoned by the Science Committee to answer questions about the role Twitter played in the summer riots. Now, as pretentious as this seems, I think he should go along to the House of Commons and make them look a little bit foolish, as George Galloway did at a Senate committee hearing about the Iraq War in 2005.
If the world had listened to Kofi Annan, whose dismissal you demanded, if the world had listened to President Chirac, who you want to paint as some kind of corrupt traitor, if the world had listened to me and the anti-war movement in Britain, we would not be in the disaster that we're in today. Senator, this is the mother of all smokescreens. You are trying to divert attention from the crimes that you supported, from the theft of billions of dollars of Iraq's wealth.
Well, it was quite an amazing performance by Galloway. And with me to discuss all this is my panel, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the former Conservative MP Michael Brown. Nigel, Parliament has the right to summon anybody. It is an ancient privilege. It has the right to imprison them. There is a cell in the Elizabeth Tower to put miscreants. But it does look a bit silly when it summons foreign citizens who actually it can't force to come, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I think it's unlikely Musk will come. I agree with you, it'd be terribly entertaining if he did. And it seems to be, after his intervention during the summer riots, it seems perfectly reasonable for the MPs to say, well, look, come over here and justify yourself.
Well, except the Speaker said they're not allowed to talk about the riots because of all the sub judice issues.
Well,
so this is quite.
Yes, this won't be till next year. So
it would have to wait quite a long time.
Well, you'd have to wait till after any court action has taken place. But I mean, the whole point is the investigation that the Science and Technology Committee will do, whatever happens, will be into the effect of social media on the rioting during the summer. If they're prevented by the courts, they'll have to delay that. But I mean, the basic principle of inviting Elon Musk to come and say, why did he say Britain was going to end up in an inevitable civil war? I'd like to hear his answer.
But from their point of view, doesn't it elevate Elon Musk, who isn't a Briton, in a way that isn't actually in their interests.
Well, he is the head of X. I mean, he's the head of a huge social media platform.
Yes.
A social media platform that was partially responsible for what happened in the summer.
He's a foreign citizen saying he thinks Britain's going to end up in civil war. Does this really matter to Parliament?
Well, I think it does because of the effect of it, because of the effect of that X had on the rioting, to actually have one of the people who personally intervened and runs Twitter himself, or rather X as he prefers to call it, it's right to actually have him here if he comes. I mean, he doesn't have to come, does he?
He doesn't have to come, but wouldn't it be great if he came?
Oh, absolutely. If I was a free agent, Musk is not going to be a free agent next year because he's going to be a senior cabinet minister in the Trump administration. I mean, the idea that a Secretary of State heading up the Department of Government Efficiency is going to come over there to our Select Committee on Science and Technology, my goodness me, he would, just as George Galloway wiped the floor with the Senate, so he would do the same. He would make fools out of the House of Commons, the Select Committee system, and he would be able to say under the cloak of parliamentary privilege whatever he likes. And if that's going to do good for the special relationship which Starmer claims he wants to have with Mr. Trump, well, good luck to his colleagues on the Select Committee.
And this is where George Galloway was so brilliant when he appeared in front of the Senate Select Committee, because he burst their bubble of pomposity, and Elon Musk would do
exactly the same. Oh, without hesitation.
And all the MPs would be there. They'd all be desperate to ask him a question.
And he'd make fools of them.
And he'd make them look silly. Yes. And he's a great communicator.
Exactly. Well, we've seen what he can do in an American election. Think what he could do for the Tory party's chances over here. I mean, if they really want to have drama and have it rebound back in their faces, bring it on.
Bring it on. So he should, if you were advising him, you'd say accept.
If I was Trump, I would say, well, and the relationship's getting a bit rocky, and Trump wants to put Starmer in his box, as might well happen at some point. What better way than to send one of your senior cabinet ministers over to a British Select Committee and lay the law down to them? That'll go down well, won't it?
I mean, under parliamentary privilege, he could say absolutely anything, and it would all be broadcast.
Yes, it would.
It would be very hard to stop.
And at least he would be properly quizzed by MPs about what he does say. So for all the reasons that you say that yes, let's get him over here, because it would be a fantastic session. I think that for him to be able to defend X to a group of MPs would actually do both sides a lot of good.
I think it would be very exciting.
What I would love to see is, in his new role dealing with American government efficiency, giving the British a lecture on why his government are getting a bit fed up with putting the financial nuclear umbrella over Europe without European governments paying up what they should do.
And he's also said that civil servants who don't go into work should be fired, which I think is absolutely brilliant. My sentiments exactly, Mr. Musk. So, in what is terrible news for industry, pensioners and people struggling to pay their energy bills, under the Labour Party, the UK has soared to third place in the global climate action table, my view of shame. A COP29 report has claimed, owing to Labour's plans to ban oil and gas drilling, that the UK was a loser last year, but a winner this year. But the real losers, of course, are us, the British people, who will end up cold and poor. Well, I'm joined now by Bob Ward, Policy and Communications at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change at the London School of Economics. Mr. Ward, Bob, thank you very much for joining me. This is the last table you want to be high up on, isn't it? It's much better to be low down and actually making some money and having a growing economy.
No, I don't think so, Sir Jacob. We should remember the reason our electricity prices are so high at the moment is because gas sets the price of electricity more often in the UK than in any other country, more than 95% of the time. That's why our electricity bills are the highest in Europe. It's not down to net zero. And in fact, if we had more renewable energy, which is cheaper than natural gas, our bills would be lower. So action on climate change is good economic sense.
Well, I don't think that's right. You're in Baku, aren't you, where we sent 400 people, 470 people or something, more than any other country in the world, to emit lots of gas, both hot air from their mouths and exhaust fumes from their aeroplanes. But our electricity is made more expensive because we do stupid things like at the Drax power station, not using coal, which is right next door, not using gas 24 hours a day, when using it intermittently makes it much more expensive. And over the last couple of weeks, if we hadn't had gas, we'd all have been freezing.
Well, you may have forgotten the energy crisis we had a couple of years ago, Sir Jacob, which is rather surprising because you were Secretary of State for Energy.
I was Secretary of State at the time, I remember it well.
Indeed, and you spent tens of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money having to protect consumers against the record high prices of natural gas. Natural gas is an incredibly precarious fuel to be dependent on, and it is very expensive. You can't get away from that. Everybody lived through that experience.
It's really easy to get away from it because natural gas is very cheap. It was an extraordinary set of circumstances that led to a spike in the price. And if we were fracking, we would have our own secure resource. And actually what I was trying to do in my very short time as Energy Secretary was secure our supply, because that was the problem, was the insecure supply. But wind is an insecure supply every day.
So if we fracked, and as you know, the vast majority of people in the UK are against fracking, but if we fracked, it would make no difference to the price of gas, which is traded on a European market. We
Up to a point, Lord Copper.
Natural gas.
Gas has a series of local prices, and when we were getting most of our supply from the North Sea and were self-sufficient in gas, there was a different UK price.
Yes, but that's not the case at the moment. It's set.
No, that's because we don't have our own supply, but if we were fracking, we would.
Yeah, well, if you thought that we would have lots and lots of gas, but there's no evidence for that. But
there's a lot of evidence for that we've got trillions of cubic feet potentially of gas.
Our gas at the moment, all the gas that we get out in the North Sea at the moment is sold on the European market. That is why we have high electricity bills. It is not renewable.
It isn't. It's because we don't run our gas and electricity generators efficiently. We just have them on standby. So you're switching them on and off all the time, which increases the cost.
It is not cheaper to generate electricity from gas all the time.
It really is, because we give huge subsidies. We give huge subsidies and guaranteed prices to the renewables providers.
So, Jacob,
we pay them for electricity we don't need.
Prices. Do you think we would have had cheaper electricity bills during the energy crisis if we were entirely dependent on gas for electricity generation during the energy crisis? Do you think
if we'd been fracking, yes, if we'd had a sensible energy policy and had used our own resources rather than this mad green obsession. But thank you for joining me from Baku, which is much appreciated. I have no idea what time it is of the day. They're probably a bit earlier than we are, but thank you for coming on. After the messages from our sponsors, we will be reflecting on the career of John Prescott with three people who knew him well as today's news of his death was revealed.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, you know. Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that have, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons. Obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel. If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about Musk and climate, and the mailmogs have come steaming in. Chris says on George Galloway, I watch the full clip every time I need inspiration, Jacob. What an orator, what a slapdown. And John says, Labour has an unblemished track record of cutting defence spending. Remember the TSR-2 aircraft, where Britain was miles ahead in technology until Labour scrapped it. Since then, it's been more of the same under Labour. I'm afraid I will have to look up the TSR-2 aircraft because I'm not familiar with it. Deep ignorance, I apologise. The former Deputy Prime Minister to Tony Blair, John Prescott, Lord Prescott as he became, has died at the age of 86 and he had been suffering from Alzheimer's. He served as a Member of Parliament for 40 years, as Deputy Leader for 13, as Deputy Prime Minister for 10, before going to the House of Lords. Known for his straight-talking style, the occasional punch of a demonstrator, or the ability to down a pint in 5 seconds, Prescott was one of the most significant Labour figures of a generation. Well, I'm joined now by Sean Woodward, who served in Tony Blair's government before going on to become a cabinet minister under Gordon Brown and therefore served with John Prescott. Sean, thank you very much for joining me. He was a very impressive figure, wasn't he, and important to Tony Blair's government particularly.
John Prescott was unique. And Jacob, what I was reflecting on earlier with some friends was that, you know, these days we look at our politicians and dare I say it, you perhaps fall into this category. There are very few real characters and real conviction politicians on all sides of the House these days. And the one thing that you have to say about John Prescott, whatever you thought of his political views, whether you're on the left or the right, Tory or Labour or whatever party you might be, was he was a character, he was a conviction politician. You could pretty much guess where John would be on most issues. And at the end of the day, you had to, I think, as a politician, really admire this man because, you know, whether you liked his politics or you didn't like his politics, there was no question why he was there, what he was there for, and he was going to argue his case come what may. And in the end, you know, what we mourn today is the passing of a truly considerable figure. It's not about whether you liked him, not about whether you shared the politics, but my goodness, I think you respected him.
He was a figure, and he was a very important part of the glue of Tony Blair's government. Bill Rammell was saying to me, who was on earlier, that he was a very effective chairman of committees and managed to bang heads together to get agreement. But he also brought into New Labour the old Labour supporters who were a little bit suspicious of Tony Blair.
Yeah, I mean, I remember very early on, in fact, I had, as you know, I had 2 years of being a Conservative before I crossed the floor of the House of Commons. And I remember as a Conservative, very early on in 1997, newly elected, I think he was on the David Frost programme. He was talking to David Frost, and there was just a reflection afterwards about what he represented. And then Tony Blair summed it up, which was, you know, John Prescott is traditional Labour values in a modern setting. And I think that always was the case. And you know, you talk about him being a chair. I mean, I remember him being in my house, and I think it must have been about 2006 in my constituency in St. Helens. And things had got quite difficult between a number of the people around Tony Blair and a number of people around Gordon Brown. And they were making quite a lot of trouble for each other. And so we had a meeting in my house in St. Helens, and the meeting was between Peter Mandelson and John Prescott. And the meeting was about how are we going to make this work? And Peter, who, you know, is a formidable figure in so many ways, was very much Peter. John Prescott was very much John Prescott. And John Prescott was, we're going to make this bloody work, come what may, Peter. And it wasn't that Peter wasn't going to make it work, but Prescott was absolutely clear that the point of a Labour Party, the reason why he felt that at some point we had to negotiate out the transition from Tony to Gordon, was that it was more important that we had a Labour Prime Minister, credible, in Downing Street, than we had any one particular figure. And that was the thing I think in the end, you really had to understand about John. If you cut John Prescott in half, you would just find Labour blood flowing. And what Labour blood was about was saying, I am going to be the voice of working class people in Britain, come what may. That isn't for sale. It isn't for wrapping up in anything. That is just what I, John Prescott, believe in. And until there is one working woman or one working man only left in the country, I will be their voice. And that's why he was such a strong trade unionist. He really passionately believed that actually there were people out there who really needed trade unions. And it wasn't therefore a numbers game, a ledgers game. It was about core values being represented. And, you know, look, you know, when he and I first met, I remember Alistair Campbell being asked by Tony Blair when I was about to cross the floor of the House of Commons, and then Prime Minister Tony Blair saying to Alistair, have you talked to Prescott about Sean coming across? And Alistair said, yeah. And Tony said, well, what did he say? And Alistair said, he just rolled his eyes. And there was something about Prescott which was a realist. You know, he got the fact that actually for New Labour to succeed, it had to be able to be in the centre too. So it wasn't that he only, as it were, was for a group of people in the Labour Party. He was a real pragmatist. So if you shared what it was about, you know what, bring it on board. And I guess I was it to be brought on board.
Brought on board. Well, thank you very much, Sean. Thank you for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Jacob. Lovely being with you.
It's good to have you. Thank you. My most intellectual panel, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and former Conservative MP Michael Brown, and both of them knew John Prescott very well. Nigel, let me come to you first, because it seems to me that John Prescott represented something fundamentally good about British society, that he came from not easy beginnings. He didn't pass his 11 plus, and yet he became the Deputy Prime Minister, a Privy Councillor, a peer of the realm. That says something very positive about the country, that he could do all that and be such a pivotal figure in a government.
Yeah, if you like, he was sort of the personification of levelling up. I mean, he actually did all that, and he was a very clever man, although not particularly well-read man. So he had a very shrewd political instinct. He also had the only porthole in the House of Commons, because he chose the office right at the top of the offices immediately opposite the Commons, because it had a porthole in to remind him of his seafaring days. But yes, well, the important part, I think Sean mentioned that, the important part he played was trying to heal the divide between Tony Blair and his Chancellor Gordon Brown. And New Labour had been the creation of the triumvirate of Brown, Blair and Peter Mandelson. Where John Prescott came in was to bridge as the bridge between New Labour and Old Labour. And although he never got on with Neil Kinnock, he did get on with Tony Blair really well and managed to keep the fractiousness between him and Gordon a bit under control. It got out of control right at the end, and not even Prescott could sort that out.
And Michael, you knew him very well. You were colleague of his in the House of Commons, and then you sketched him. Did he like your sketches?
Well, let's start with the first part. The first 18 years, he when I overlapped with him from 1979 when I got elected to 1997, we were oil and water, and he regarded me as a class traitor because, like him, I failed my 11 plus, and I went to a secondary modern school, and like him, I loved driving Jaguars. But there, the similarities ended. He regarded me as a class traitor for those reasons, and we argued in committees. Our two constituencies were separated only by the River Humber. He was nicknamed the mouth of the Humber North, and I was nicknamed the mouth of the Humber South. And whenever we were on a standing committee about the privatisation of the ports, or British Steel, or British Coal, the National Coal Board, we were absolutely, I wouldn't say we loathed each other, but we did not get on. And he said, Brown, just before the 97 election, Brown, I'm going to get you. I'm going to lose you your seat. And if you remember, as deputy leader of the Labour Party during the 97 election, he was the chap going around the constituencies with the battle bus. And he began the battle bus in Cleethorpes playing beach cricket. And the headline in the Grimsby Evening Telegraph was, I'm going to bowl Brown out and I'm going to knock Brown for 6, all over the local paper. And he was my nemesis and I lost. Fast forward 13 months and I became a sketch writer. And he was a sketch writer's dream. I wrote my first sketch where, among other things, the sentence was, the words tumbled out from the Deputy Prime Minister in no particular order. I got a phone call to go up to attend upon him. I was summoned to his vast tennis court office in Whitehall, and he came out effing and blinding and looking very grumpy. And I thought, surely he can't take offence at that, among other things, which were not half as bad as that. That was the worst thing, I thought. Anyway, he said, you were a useless MP, effing and blinding in front of his private secretary. And then a broad smile crossed his countenance. And he said, I loved it. I loved it. And ever after, we became very good friends. And he gave me his valedictory interview when I was presenting the Yorkshire Television Politics programme at the end of his time in 2007 as Deputy Prime Minister. So that's why I'm wearing a black tie as a mark of respect.
Bridge the political divide in the end, that he was tribally Labour, but he had at least one proper Tory friend.
It took the Humber Bridge to join our two constituencies together, but it took my 2 lives and his 2 lives to end up as good friends.
I will confess as we end, my only political regret really is I was once disagreeable about John Prescott, and I thought that was a mistake and regretted ever afterwards. Town rest grant unto him, O Lord, by the mercy of God, may he rest in peace. Amen. And thank you to my panel. Up next, it's Ben Leo in for Patrick Christie's. Ben, what is on your programme this evening?
Hello, Jacob. I have a simple question tonight. Why is this Labour government getting rid of £500 million worth of military equipment, choppers, ships, drones, at a time when we're allowing Ukraine to lob our missiles deep into Russia? And by the way, what happened to Labour's pledge to spend 2.5% of the budget on defence? Also, a terrorist who plotted to blow up the London Stock Exchange is possibly being released from prison in January. Happy New Year.
Well, that all sounds very interesting, and the clear message is you can never believe a word this government says. That's coming up after the weather. I will be back on Monday at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation, and you may have heard rumours of inclement weather in the country over the coming days. This won't be true, of course, in Somerset. In Somerset, the sun will be out, it will be shining, it will be as if it were July for the whole weekend, as you're about to hear from the Meteorological Office.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. The snow and ice risk continues this evening and overnight, and it is